Welcome to Microcollege, a podcast exploring innovative, place-based, and humanly scaled responses to the crises in higher education, meaning, and discourse in our time. Everyone knows that colleges and universities are at a breaking point, but what can be done? I'm Jacob Hunt, the director of Thoreau College, a microcollege in Viroqua, Wisconsin. Join us each week as we tackle this question head-on. Welcome to Microcollege, the podcast of Thoreau College. Today we have two very special guests, Julie Tomaro, Nicholas WazeeGale. These are two of the core instructors and leaders of the Driftless Folk School. The Driftless Folk School is one of the constituent parts of Thoreau College. The Driftless Folk School was started in 2006 by a group of people here in the Viroqua area, southwestern Wisconsin, people who had an interest in sharing homesteading skills, folk arts, building community here, and over the last decade and a half has built a really wide community of people who participate in classes and events, and in community building exercises of different kinds. The mission of the Driftless Folk School it describes itself as a community of lifelong learners, cultivating personal and cultural resilience through hands-on educational experiences. So some of these classes, they typically range from a day to 2 days to 3 days sometimes. These are things like homesteading skills, gardening, woodworking, clay, basketry, and wilderness skills. So Nicholas and Julie are two really of core instructors here, very skilled people in different fields. And maybe we could start off by asking each of you to describe the sorts of things that you teach. Julie, would you like to give us a shot?
Sure, yeah. For the last couple of years, I've been teaching sewing classes. So garment sewing, we've done some pants, some dresses, some beginning sewing machine skills classes just to get people comfortable with using a sewing machine they may have from a grandparent or a thrift store. Some really foundational skills that used to be so common in every household. Relearning them, getting it back into people's hands and minds.
Awesome. Nicholas?
Yeah, thanks. I cover a lot of wilderness skills things primarily. I guess a lot of it would fit under that heading. So various outdoor skills like foraging and wildcrafting and everything from nature observation and tracking and different like winter skills to some handcrafts and finer work along the lines of spoon carving and birch bark boxes and baskets. That usually ties back into, connecting to the land and connecting people to place and to each other through working with their hands.
Fantastic. So here on the podcast, we like to start our conversations with some biographical storytelling. So I'm wondering if each of you could tell us a bit about where you were, 18 to 20 years old. What was your education like? What were you doing? And what did you appreciate about that time? And what did you feel maybe was missing?
Yeah, for me, I guess 18 to 20 years old, I was graduated high school and kind of was told that my track was the traditional college track, and I tried going to a traditional 4-year college and got about 2 years into that and just really was not connecting with that experience. Came home, tried community college, was still not connecting with that, and was feeling kind of I wasn't feeling lost or worried about anything at the time, but just it didn't feel like that was my place in the world to do that. And so I really wasn't doing much of consequence at that time. And then when I was 22, 23, I worked at a petting farm where I got my first farming experience.
It was like a petting zoo?
It was a petting zoo, yeah. We had, alpacas and sheep, and you could feed them carrots, and I would give informational sort of lectures, and that's when I really learned that I was actually smart, which I kind of didn't realize because of struggling with like ADD and other things like that in traditional model of schooling, but that as long as I was moving and working and doing, I could know and do anything and felt really confident with that. And then when I was 23, 24, And then into being 25, I actually spent a year doing disaster relief for Hurricane Katrina. And that really kind of, kicked into higher gear, that kind of knowledge of, if given the opportunity, I can do anything. And I just was spurred to be very just an involved person in my world, and how could I take or see people's needs and take that to like a next level. But yeah, in maybe a different model than kind of traditionally. So yeah, that really got me going, and then I stumbled out here to the Driftless. And
yeah, it's that moment of Hurricane Katrina, that disaster response. I've heard many people actually express there's an experience of awakening of to service, to certain life purpose out of that experience in particular. So
yeah, I think that when I was down there were a lot of traditional organizations who were feeding people meals from canned goods, but I went with an organization that was kind of based on the Rainbow family and sort of the idea of like rainbow gatherings, where we're cooking in areas where you don't have traditional ways of cleaning dishes, traditional ways of gathering water, and we still managed to do 5-course meals, a lot of organic foods, running a free store, running gutting operations, and it was just very empowering to see this kind of alternatively minded group of people who were just like, we've got skills. They might not be the out of the box skills, but they are actionable, and that really launched me on the rest of my life. And without that, I don't know, I'd probably still be working menial jobs, living in my parents' basement. I don't know, probably not. But
Nicholas, what about you?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to hear Julie's tale, and definitely can relate to some of that. I was a total nature-oriented kid, and totally felt this devotion to the natural realm as a young person. And as I got older, kind of fell into the expectations of following through with college and all of that. But I didn't make it nearly as far as Julie. I made it through about a semester at a prestigious little liberal arts college, and thought, I'm not in this world to look through microscopes or deal with frat situations, and this is all wrong. After 4 years or however many years of schooling that I felt kept me apart from the natural world, I had to step back and found myself traveling, and eventually finding opportunities to immerse myself deeper in the natural world and in different wilderness skills kind of situations. That had been a part of my high school experience too, living or moving to Pennsylvania and having kind of not a real good mesh with the local scene there. Found me up in the mountains a lot, spending more and more time through high school alone and observing and working with what the natural realm gave, and devouring books on anything that related to all that. So I went back to that pretty shortly after trying conventional schooling, and devoted myself to learning all that I could in the out of doors. Eventually found somewhere that wouldn't kick me out of the woods, but would actually support me being in the woods long term, up in the North Woods of Wisconsin, the Teaching Drum Outdoor School, and that helped to definitely really consolidate what I was all about. Traveled from there, and eventually kind of settled back to roots in the Driftless area here, where I had lived as a young person, and where my family had land, and a little parcel outside of Viroqua. And from there, just kind of settled back into this being a pretty, something that kind of represented all the different sides of what I had gathered thus far, having good natural landscape, but also good things happening in the alternative-minded scene, and opportunity to reach people and work with people in the kinds of skills that I wanted to share, and be 1 foot in the woods and 1 foot amongst people who are receptive to connecting to that world.
Yeah. It's interesting. Both of you mention basically different learning styles than what was being practiced or rewarded in the conventional education setting. And actually, that's really emerging, I think, as a theme in many of our conversations about microcolleges, right? The mainstream of higher education and also secondary high school education, elementary school education is quite narrow in the sorts of skills and the capacities that are trained and recognized and rewarded. And yet the things that both of you know how to do, right? The things that the skills and knowledge about plants and about handwork and about how to actually do things are things that have been the bread and butter, literally the anchor of human existence for millennia. How to make clothes, how to find food, how to survive in different settings, and it's just something that I hear from young people who are coming out of high school, people coming out of college, that they have a sense of not knowing how to do anything. How to do practical things that whether that be financial things, paying taxes, managing a checkbook, or growing their own food, or anything of the sorts of things that you teach. So how did you learn what you know, how to do what you know how to do, the knowledge about skills and about the natural world that both of you carry?
Yeah, I think that it kind of all gravitates around where your focus is. Are you looking to indulge in the whims of the present time, or are you captivated by what came before and the bigger picture of what's going on with humankind? And I've always been really passionately enraptured by where we come from and what we were once able to do, and even as a child trying to make bow drill fire and figure all that kind of stuff out has made me esteem more where we come from, not where we seem to be haphazardly colliding towards. And I guess maybe we both have that to say that it's a matter of what you value in life and how that guides you. And the chaos of the modern day does not appeal to me very much.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like, you, Nicholas, have found, teachers in places like the Teaching Drum at Skills School. How important the relative balance of teachers, mentors, books, just experimentation?
Yeah, I think seeds planted are super valuable, and that came from books a lot in my young years. But experience has always been the biggest teacher. You need pieces to fit into that puzzle, but in teachers or books or videos or whatever can really provide that. But I feel like learning to learn is just such a deeply personal thing. Some people really gravitate towards teachers, or some people just gravitate towards playing around with things. I had the luxury as a child of having a lot of woods around and a lot of freedom to just mess around with stuff. I remember dragging chunks of wood and bark and plants and dead animals home all through my childhood, and luckily I had parents that tolerated that. But yeah, you never know where those curiosities are going to go, and learning to tan pelts has led to knowing what, all the hairs on a coyote's body, and when I pick up a hair on a trail, having that as a reference point. So it's mostly just been accumulating knowledge and information through experience, but that doesn't mean that the teachers or the situations haven't been invaluable. At the Teaching Drum outdoor school, we definitely got guidance, but we were just left to figure things out through a lot of that experience in the early years of the Wilderness Guide program. So we were just out deep in the woods figuring stuff out all the time and falling on our faces a lot, but you learn how to learn, and I think that's what has been a really powerful force in carrying me through, experimentation with methods and getting things figured out and learning how to make things and do things.
What about you, Julie?
Yeah, I think what Nicholas speaks to is just that love of learning is just so powerful to lead you on a path that maybe isn't even defined as you're walking along it. Coming out of leaving Hurricane Katrina disaster land, I was kind of overwhelmed and depressed by witnessing everybody's everything becoming trash, because when your house is flooded to the attic, it is covered in black mold in a matter of weeks. And then I spent a year living in a tent and having very few possessions, and living in this very intentional community, which was energized around this disaster relief, but was still strongly connected, but also living very minimally with very few needs individually. And I felt like I was never going to be able to return to, living in sort of like a box, if you will. So I was fortunate enough that when I left there, I was able to kind of stumble along and just kept saying yes to opportunities. And I ended up in rural Madison area, kind of a little further west from Madison, living on land with a woman who did back to the land stuff in this area in the late 70s, 80s. And so she taught me chicken butchering and gardening and was very supportive. She was, I got a job milking goats, and so I got to raise goat kids for meat. And so she was like, I'll pay for the fencing. You can, you pasture your goats over here or over here. I need this brush cleared. So it was giving me this kind of like training ground where I had very low risks, but lots of opportunities to like explore and experience. I definitely grew up in a family where it was like everything that grew outside was poison. You buy food in the store, but if you touch it from outside, it could potentially kill you. And so just kind of being retrained on that, and then just being receptive and like saying yes to opportunities when they were presented. Made a dear friend who was selling a yurt, and that coincided with when we were looking for land out here. So then we were able to get that yurt and just, kind of putting myself into experiences where I was around people who had more knowledge and more skills than I did. And that really invited me to continue learning. And I found that just a huge passion for gaining these skills, gaining this knowledge, and connecting with other people who have these skills, because their stories were so inspiring to me, the way that they were connecting with the land. And it felt like a much more appropriate way to be in the world, rather than just like, living in a box and having a job and kind of keeping the parts of my life compartmentalized, my work life and my, social life. It feels better when they're kind of more integrated, and that felt really appropriate. And yeah, I just kept finding opportunities for more learning. And sewing was a skill that I had always had from childhood. My mom, without much guidance, sort of just let me sew on her machine, and so I was able to kind of, have some base skills, but definitely just found a lot of love and passion and enthusiasm in like growing those skills and finding more skills. And yeah, it was very empowering.
Microcollege is recorded in the broadcast studios of WDRT Viroqua, 91.9 FM, Driftless Community Radio on Main Street in Viroqua, Wisconsin. Thanks to Jim and all the folks at WDRT for the support of Thoreau College and the Microcollege podcast.
Yeah, one of the things, so both of you are not only highly skilled craftspeople, knowledgeable about practical things, but also are small business owners, right? You're running your own enterprises. And I think that is something, a part of the resilience that the Driftless Folk School talks about. And then one of the things you can learn in a microcollege is entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship. So I wonder if you could talk about just a little bit about your other work. Your instructors with the folk school, that happens occasionally on weekends throughout the year. Can you talk about your other activities?
Yeah, I run a small upholstery business, but it also is just a mashup of all sewing skills: mending clothes, altering, repairing, replacing zippers, that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's a great skill that gets me into conversations with a lot of folks, whether it's around, this piece of furniture they want to restore that belonged to a grandparent or multiple generations. That feels really awesome to be able to help a family carry their heirloom pieces forward into a new era for more generations to enjoy. And connecting with people as they need alterations or mending for weddings, or repair a beloved coat that has seen a lot of adventures and maybe some better times. So yeah.
Yeah, so interrupting that cycle of consumerism where you just buy the thing new and then throw it out. And keeping it going from generation to generation. Yeah. It feels good to have a small opportunity to encourage and support people doing that. Yeah, so if people wanted to connect with you, what's the name of the business? My business is Blue Bobbin Studio. So, yeah. And great. Yeah. Nicholas, you're a teacher in many different places.
Yeah, I would say teaching is what I mostly do, but I do way too many things to do. Yeah, it's probably part of my ADD that I kind of have is too many things because there's so many seasons and gifts from the land. But yeah, my wife and I have a independent gig doing classes and handcrafts under at WildRoots HandCrafts.com that is a bunch of our woodwork, like spoon and bowl carving. She and I both do birch bark work. She does a lot of woven birch work, and I do a lot of Scandinavian-style birch boxes. And she also does work with deerskin that we tan, mostly bark tan deerskin work and really beautiful bags. But yeah, so we keep up with handcrafts and are in the Viva Gallery here in Viroqua, which is mostly a wintertime thing for myself. But then I also teach, we teach kids classes, and I do some adult stuff outside of the Driftless Folk School, both there and a bunch of summer camps at KVR. And then some, wild crafting when I'm bored of gathering mushrooms and providing those to people, like different wild medicinals from the area. But yeah, way too many things to do any of them probably as productively as economically one would if they wanted to actually make a solid living. But it's kind of what the seasons provide us, and it's hard to say no to what the land is giving. So we try to keep up with all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, certainly that's something I appreciate about your teaching, having participated in a few of your classes with Thoreau students. Just the sense of abundance, right? To go on a walk through the woods with Nicholas is really to get a sense of the abundance of our land and of the world. There's so many gifts, so many things to eat, so many things to create clothing and other useful things, and just a sense of beauty and wonder, which is something I really appreciate. So.
Yeah, thanks. It's pretty limitless. Really, it's a matter of how much you can perceive and how much you have time to take on. Which, if you drag a lot of it home, sometimes it doesn't always get dealt with.
So the Driftless Folk School offers classes throughout the year. This year, I think we have over 70 classes. We went and counted up this morning. And the like I say, these are generally one-day or half-day classes. There are people who come to these from all over the upper Midwest. And there are people of all ages, adults of all ages. Occasionally we have kids classes as well. I'm wondering if you could reflect a bit on the classes you've taught. Who comes to these classes and what are they looking for?
I think people who are looking for both, at least as far as sewing classes, people who are looking to take a little bit more ownership over what they own and what they consume and their relationship with that, kind of tying in, waste reduction, being able to tailor things to themselves a little more as a way of feeling good in the clothes that they're in. Store-bought clothes are not designed for all bodies. They're designed for average, which very few people fit kind of an average mold. So it's people who are looking also to connect and converse with other like-minded individuals. I find a lot of camaraderie in classes. People often end up sharing Instagram, hashtags or links or whatever that they want to, continue to connect and share with these people. So yeah, a lot of community mindedness, a lot of people who are looking to connect at kind of a deeper core level too, not just drop in and then drop out, but to converse and engage and befriend. And so, yeah, I've noticed a lot of that. And I would say, I've been surprised by a handful of men too taking sewing classes. They're traditionally very much a women's thing, but it's always fun to bring in new voices and new people.
Yeah, that aspect of gender roles, like a lot of things that are fall in the folk school realm have like a traditional kind of gender marking, right? Whether it's sewing or maybe some of the things that Nicholas does are traditionally more male, like outdoorsy kind of sorts of things. But I'm instructor of butchering classes, chicken butchering and deer butchering classes, and I certainly see that people like exploring things sort of outside of their traditional gender role boundaries as actually an important thing that people are doing in these classes. And is that something you've seen too, Nicholas, at all?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, it's not a common class that is mostly males in my groupings or in my classes. It's usually a pretty wide spectrum, and I can think of a lot of situations where there's definitely a lot of female participation, whether it's foraging or wilderness skills or any of it. I almost have trouble answering this question at all because I feel like I really get a little bit of everything from all over the place. Mm-hmm. It's usually people I think that are definitely looking outside of the normal trajectory a little bit, mm-hmm. whether they are a little bit later in life and kind of thinking back to like childhood experiences and wanting to remember how it was to camp at not a typical campsite that they used to do with their aunt or whatever, or young people looking to explore other options in life. Sometimes, foraging can really bring in just about anybody from anywhere, but whether it's people just wanting to feed themselves better or occasionally someone who's involved in the restaurant world or people fascinated by mushrooms, but it really can span a really a wide array of people. I feel like in a lot of these classes, which I think is what's great about all of this, is that we get to put all those people together because there's precious little of that happening in a mm-hmm. lot of areas where people are just kind of randomly being thrown together. We certainly have certain classes will attract certain crowds to mm-hmm. some degree for sure.
I think, what sense, do you have any sense of how many people take the skills that they've learned in your classes and then continue to practice them afterwards?
Yeah, there's certainly a component of people that I'll get feedback from or I'll run into later who have really gone a long ways with it. Or, I had one participant who ended up taking off, even though he was like a little later in life, taking off for Alaska to go live up there after being a business owner down here. And not that I necessarily implanted all of that, but he was seeking this knowledge and was getting it from me and other places and then took off with it. But I certainly see there's a lot of that. I think some people are definitely just looking for experiences. I'll get, maybe a mother and daughter who are always looking to do something different each summer or something. So we'll get mm-hmm. people who, I wouldn't say entertainment level, but I would say that are just looking for new experiences.
Enrichment.
And they at least get a mind-opening experience, and I'm comfortable with that too, because even if they don't wrap their whole life around that, they have an open-mindedness to that, and then they might support that in others or their children or a cousin who's really becoming passionate about such things. Yeah. But
yeah, I feel like with sewing, a lot of people, it can be very intimidating. Fabric costs money, though I always tell people to bring an old sheet if they're worried about cutting into expensive fabric. But it can be very intimidating to take that on your own for the first time, and to have somebody that kind of can translate maybe it's pattern language into actionable steps, that can feel really like that it opens another door. So that they feel a little more confident going home and sewing something on their own. And I've definitely know people that have, maybe they haven't gotten into more complicated garments or anything, but they've definitely gone home and done some simple things or even just have the confidence to repair something, knowing that there's some simple steps and simple things to keep an eye on, and that it makes things, very, very doable. Once you just have a little bit of coaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that touches on just the humanness of what we're trying to do, and I personally really don't like learning from a video or mm-hmm. whatever. I mean, I do it, and I get things from it, and I appreciate that that's available. But yeah, having I'll get that a lot with foraging, where people, they can understand who these plants are a little bit, but they're hesitant to take that step. But you get them out there, and we're all talking about, people are sharing experiences of eating nettles, and next thing you know, we're cooking some up. And, it really breaks down those barriers effectively when you create a human environment to have these experiences in. And it's something that's starting to become, unfortunately, rare.
And a sensory environment. I think the stuff that you're doing, Nicholas, the foraging and also the carving, leatherwork and things like that. Like there's a tactile sensory component that you have to do in person, right? And I find that in my classes as well. You can read a description of a chicken butchering or making sourdough bread or something like that, but there are some things you can only get in person: the smells, the kind of the tactile, like touch, sense sorts of things and the sounds that are only present in person.
Yeah, that's that humanness. I was working with clay, like liquefying and cleaning it, like straining it, and the whole having my hands in there was just total like bliss to just kind of get me out of my mind and get me into my like body and the moment and such. And I think that's definitely, whether it's fabric or bark or wood or handling plants and working with plants, it's all just a very human, old kind of thing that we're like starting to long for in the present day.
Yeah, I think these are also things that have been kind of put on a pedestal in a way for a long time, where people are like, oh, you have to be a professional to do that. That's for, you don't have those skills. You can buy that, but you can't do that. And I'm like, that's not true. Most things are things that people have been doing for all of existence, and those have been, how I grew up with like, everything's poisonous, don't touch it. And to kind of get over that with just like reading a book is not as comfortable as getting over that by being in community with other people who are all hands-on together, and that feels more empowering than than just getting something from a book or from a YouTube video. Like you're not connecting with anybody there. You might be like learning more about a plant or learning a hand skill, but you're not doing that in community. And so many of these things were all things that were done in community traditionally forever, whether it was carving a spoon. You wouldn't carve a spoon by yourself. You would sit around and carve a spoon together, and the wood chips would be gathered for smoking something, or whatever. Like, it was not done in isolation, and everything is like compartmentalized and isolated in our society, especially with COVID, and people's work lives, which was kind of like the last social place that you were with people who weren't necessarily your friend group. Now you're not even necessarily in that community.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to do just for our souls.
Thoreau College is a leader in an emergent movement dedicated to the renewal and revitalization of higher education through the creation of new, humanly scaled institutions with holistic curricula known as microcolleges. Thoreau College, higher education for the whole human being.
For folks who are listening to the podcast over time, about a month ago, we had an interview with Dr. Julie Shackelford, who is an instructor at the International People's College, which is a Danish folk high school, Scandinavian folk high school in Denmark, where this sort of word, the concept of folk school, originates. And people who have listened to that will have heard a description of a quite a different sort of a folk school than the one we're talking about here. In its roots in Denmark, these were residential programs for young adults, incorporating, over several months, people living together, generally having some sort of an academic content, whether that's in historically Bible studies, or in the case of the International People's College, these are peace studies and languages and things like that. But also singing and the skills of living together, and quite often folk arts and practical skills as well, mixed into the whole of an immersive experience, right? So in a way, when people have encountered folk schools in North America, they will have seen something a bit more like what we've been talking about here, right? They're trainings in folk arts and skills. So one of the things we're trying to do here with Thoreau College and the Driftless Folk School is to bring that larger context, right? An education for the whole person into our work. So I wonder, you both have worked a bit with Thoreau College program participants, traditional college age students who are also doing academic studies and life and community. I'm wondering if you could reflect upon what do the sorts of skills that you're teaching and offering, what might that bring into a holistic education for, let's say, a person's course through their college years?
Yeah, I would say that in my experience with Thoreau, anyhow, that it's really, with the students from Thoreau College, that it has seemed to be a really nice interplay between what they might be reading about with living deliberately in Walden or other works, and actually going out and doing that, which I know they're doing through other avenues with the school as well, but really going out there and experiencing the landscape and connecting to it, because that's what's contained in a lot of those works, is stepping back from societal norms and really learning to think for yourself in the realm of experience and time spent, alone, or at least from your own vantage point, connecting with the world around. But yeah, I think it's really important and great that young people are having opportunities and doorways available to connect directly, because it's definitely not the way our commodity-oriented, I don't know, kind of is, as I see it, slightly greedy society is headed. It's all about making more and doing more in progress, but not necessarily deep connection and relationship, particularly with the land. But I think also it's being stripped from each other, relationship with each other.
Julie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really, the pace at which Thoreau moves it's important to slow down and not feel like you're rushed through your experience, that you're, present in the moment, whether that's, out in the woods alone, kind of really, soul searching, or if you're just in a group with a class with a group, that you are kind of really in that moment and sort of trying to be as aware as possible of sort of your place in that space, the place of community, the place of whatever you're working on, and to not, be hurried through that, as, it feels like, traditional colleges are, very focused on, passing this, getting to the next step, next. What are your next steps? Always planning the next thing, as opposed to that just being present, being rooted, and that these sort of slower crafts very much are not to be hurried. You can't rush through, a 48-hour solo. You can't rush through. You can't rush through sewing a garment, or you're going to spend more time unpicking it than you are, making it. So it's just, taking the steps, but taking them conscientiously, taking them, trying to maintain awareness and mindfulness. And that's kind of like a little catchphrase right now, is like, oh, mindfulness. But it's so true that we are so busy hurrying that we're not actually seeing or doing or living the moment where we are now.
Right. If you're running a sewing machine, you've got to be present, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can sew over your own finger
Right.
way easier than you think. Yeah, it's important to make sure you're matching those pieces up correctly, because if you're not, like, you're just going to undo them, or you won't have a finished product.
Yeah.
So,
And even the learning to undo something is its own value, right? Like there's something that
well, and I think a lot of people, when I teach people, like, oh, I can't believe I messed this up. I can't believe I sewed this together, and like, maybe some of that is just like, oh, you got to slow down and really, see what you're doing beforehand. But also it's seeing that, like, oh, I'm actually kind of fast at undoing stitches, not because I don't make mistakes, but because I do make them, and I have to undo them. So it's seeing that, like, mistakes can be made, and then mistakes can be undone, and then we can make repairs. It's all part of the process. Nobody's supposed to be perfect at anything. And I think it's very easy to be hard on ourselves for failing or not doing it right, when it's like, actually it doesn't really matter. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, it's not pushing buttons on
Yeah.
a screen.
Right,
These
yeah.
are delicate processes that take some floundering and failing. I mean, that's how we really learn.
Yeah,
Like, we make
yeah.
mistakes, and we're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, that's what I don't want to do next time. Now I want to do this, and now I know why.
Right.
Yeah, I find working with natural materials, right, whether it's in the kitchen or with a handcraft of some kind, or indeed with living things, gardening with animals, things like that, you learn to, they're not generic. They're not, made from a plastic mold, right? They are the things of the natural world are unique individualities, and that you can't apply like the cookie cutter, literally.
Yeah, you have to listen and actually be in relationship with them and respect and honor that they are what they are.
Yeah.
They're not yours.
And I think that's one beautiful thing about working with natural materials too, is if you do make a mistake, like that returns to the earth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you're just not creating more trash. You're just, if you're carving a spoon, I always think spoon carving is such a handy thing. You have to cut a new branch, find a new piece of wood, but you're not, nothing is lost. You haven't failed. You just begin anew.
Yeah.
Your kitchen gets a new spoon.
The kitchen, yes. Right. It's
Henry David Thoreau and other writers like him who are engaged with writing about the natural world and about also practical skills or experiences in practical manual kind of affairs. One of the things that really becomes evident in their writing is the use of all of these physical experiences for thinking. Right? Mm-hmm. If you look closely at our language, it's made up of physical metaphors, right? And a lot of times metaphors made directly from practical fields, from farming, from forestry, from ships, sailing metaphors, things like that. Certainly from things out of the kitchen and out of working with fabric and that sort of thing. So that's really something that I also appreciate for bringing this. It becomes the language in which you are talking about things metaphorically. You're talking about social relationships and talking about justice and truth in some sort of higher sense. The language you use is still very concrete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of the missions, stated kind of purpose of the Driftless Folk School, which I think goes back to the Scandinavian roots, is building resilience within a culture, within a community. I'm wondering if both of you, as leaders of the Driftless Folk School, as people who've been teaching and working in this field for years, how does that play out? What does having a folk school bring to a specific local community?
Yeah, I think it harbors that knowledge. I mean, it's up to the community to make use of it, but it does, I think, become a repository of that information, housed in individuals in that community or in the wider community of instructorship. A great example would be Dan Pepper and what a repository he was when this community lost him, one of the original founders also of the folk school. But yeah, we all carry that, and we kind of house it in this vessel of the folk school and offer it through that to those who are interested. And yeah, I definitely think that sharing of information of all sorts is valuable to a community. Our community is definitely pretty active with a lot of what we do in the folk school, and also contributes a lot of it. We still get a lot of local participation as mm-hmm. well. But yeah, I think it definitely is a component of this Driftless area here that's pretty valuable in what it holds. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's really beautiful about folk schools is how they are so place-based. A folk school in our region up here in the upper Midwest is going to be completely different than a folk school in, vastly different parts of the country. And that it gives you an opportunity, and I think this is more true for classes like yours, Nicholas, rather than like a sewing class, because you kind of, a sewing machine is very much like an indoor thing. But if you're connecting over at like the spoon gathering or something like that, and learning, to see the grains in the wood, that then when you go out into a forest, you're seeing these trees. I mean, it just gives you an ability to kind of see with a little bit more open eyes, kind of the place that you live mm-hmm. and the ecosystem that you're a part of, because we are a part of this ecosystem, whether we cover it in pavement or, it's a wild place, it's an ecosystem. And a folk school really grounds you kind of in that place and in your ecosystem and in, whether it's, what are your chickens foraging on during the summer months or, a winter wilderness survival class. It's it is unique to different bioregions, and I think that's pretty special to kind of really dive deep into.
Yeah, it goes into helping to make a place a place, right? Not just a generic spot on the map, but a place, and a folk, right? The people who are of that place. So knowing the plants and the animals, knowing the traditional crafts and skills is an important piece of that. I guess I wonder, what something that I also see in my class, and I wonder in my classes, and I wonder if you see this as well, is the kind of community that forms among the participants just in the course of the day in which you're doing the class.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely some really great camaraderie that usually comes out of it. People are usually maybe slightly quiet at first and then busy for the first part of the day, but usually lunch and thereafter, people are really starting to mesh and enjoy the space and the social element. Sometimes people make a couple mistakes about then, but it's important to also be doing the bonding of the bonding and the connecting of people.
Yeah, I think, these skills that we teach don't have political leanings. There's not any, need. I mean, I'm sure people end up, talking about whatever they're going to talk about, but often the conversation just kind of grows around just who are you? Who is your family? Why are you doing this? What is your, and mine are like, oh, I sewed with my mother or my grandmother, like this ability to kind of share stories and kind of connect with like more of a whole person rather than, like who you are in the voting booth, but everybody had, or not everybody, but, many people had experiences with grandparents, whether it was more nature or more craft or whatever, but the skills of our grandparents' generation were so much greater than ours that, many people kind of got a little glimpse of that. And whether they can say, oh, I remember my grandparents butchering chickens when I was a kid, or, learning to sew from a grandparent, or, I remember, my grandpa taking me out and like IDing plants, which, now to me is one of my like most treasured memories, but, and I would love to, talk all about those kind of things. And the class kind of opens up a space for that where, if I'm in a foraging class, I could say, oh, I had this, nature connection with my grandpa or whatever it was. I think that's a really beautiful thing and a really great opportunity to kind of see our fellow humans just as people with like very basic needs. We need clothing, we need food, we need, a way to cook our food. We need, very simple things. Our needs are very, very simple and all available through your local folk school.
Yeah, togetherness. Yeah, we are just basically a collection of what was well known only that far back. Like simple things that you could run a class on, like making your own axe handle, is something that everybody had to do not that long ago, but now it could be a class at your local folk school. And there's some nuance and challenge to making a good axe handle and making it fit right and not having it shrink. And yeah, there's just innumerable things that were pretty commonplace, and I think that's what we all stand for, is like holding on to that even in this age where we're propelling forward at such a rapid pace, that there's real value to where we come from and what we've known and been connected to and still are and may lose as part of ourselves if we don't hold on to it through these kind of institutions.
Yeah, I come back to that a lot and thinking about what exactly are we doing here? What am I doing here with these projects? Is that we live in a time where we have to do things intentionally, right? And Thoreau is pointing to that in his writing, and I think it's built into the folk school movement as well, that, yes, if we go back 2 or 3 generations, a lot of this stuff that we are sharing with our students in the folk school classes, you wouldn't have had to organize a class for it, start an organization to teach people chicken butchering or sewing or anything like this. But we do have to do that now. And not only that, but to create context for celebrating the changes of the seasons, for really spiritual or sort of cultural sharings of different kinds, and that I think is it allows us to do it also consciously and intentionally to select the pieces that we want to be there, but it's something that requires conscious doing, right? So I think that when I think about resilience, that's part of what we're doing. We're actually building some of the community kind of institutions, the organs of community life that would otherwise not be there if they weren't being held consciously.
Yeah.
Nicholas, one thing I wanted to ask you about is that I know that the sort of the heritage and the wisdom of Indigenous peoples is an important part of your formation, and I'm wondering if you can talk about the relationship of the folk school and your work to the Indigenous peoples of this part of the country.
Yeah, I certainly view Indigenous knowledge as a real beacon of how people can live in a balanced way with the natural world. Obviously, this is all a real hot topic these days with cultural appropriation, and I do try to really consciously walk that line. But I was very inspired as a child with a Native stepfather who had our bookshelf stocked with all sorts of classic Native literature and things like Tom Brown's survival books and such. That those are all hugely influential and key pieces. And yeah, I don't think anybody should. I think we should be careful not to dismiss the wisdom that's held in that. Doesn't mean we should make shallow mockery at Halloween. That really needs to be carefully. Some of that needs to be carefully tended to. Some of the egregious misrepresentation that our dominant culture has done to native ways. But I certainly feel inspired, though I try to walk slightly astride that. But we're all trying to connect, I think, to the natural world and really hopefully make this a better place for all of us in the future by learning from people who can set an example of doing something different than our highly destructive ways, whether you're looking at colonialism or just modern dominant culture that is highly destructive to the natural world. But we as the folk school are definitely working to have improving and better relationships with Native communities and encourage instructorship to join in where that's appropriate. And we've had some good black ash basketry classes lately and hope to grow on that from some really prominent Native basket weavers in the state. But it's a super complex issue, and it's valid that we're viewing it as complex, but I think that the baby in the bathwater of appreciating and esteeming the relationship with the natural world that was shown to us, or that we should have been paying attention to as white dominant culture coming into the land, should be honored and appreciated for just showing that we can work in a much deeper and more genuine and honoring way with the landscape around in a lot less destructive manner. Mm-hmm. That answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So we're coming up to the end of our time here. I'm wondering if, as a concluding question for both of you, we heard about your process to getting to where you are today, and I'm wondering if you could if you had an advice of any kind for a young person, let's say a high school student or a person who's setting out on their career as young adults, or maybe someone who's a teacher or a parent of someone who in that age range. What advice do you have for them from your life experience about building meaningful, fulfilling and the rich lives that we've been talking about here?
I would start with just the value of community, the value of the people around you. You don't necessarily have to agree on every sort of thing on a social context, to just recognize that you're in community with these people, and that when you work as a community, you are stronger and more resilient than when you try and come in with a bulldozer with different ideas, or even try and just run away from ideas that you're not 100% on board with. That the harder work, but the more valuable work and the more sustaining work is to dig deep into place and to people and to connectedness. And I think that's very powerful. I think that in a society where individualism has been kind of put on a pedestal, we're actually not very strong or resilient as individuals as we are when we are working with others towards bigger goals. And it takes more work, and it takes more commitment, and it takes more ability to kind of use all of our communication skills. But they're the most valuable skills we have is communicating and connecting.
Excellent. Nicholas?
Yeah, that's a great answer. I would say to youth in a situation wanting to seek, more of this depth and more of what folk schools maybe embody is that it's more available than you might think as well. Like, you might find it in the most unlikely places of, a grandparent who may be in a nursing home but knows a lot, or just being with the landscape that is around you, even if it's a suburban backyard. I remember trying to be really still and feed squirrels out of my hand in backyard in La Crosse, and that was just in a city, but that taught me a lot about not making eye contact and trying to be nonchalant and all sorts of things. There's really you're tapping into something that's really big and really old if you're looking to learn more about whether it's the natural world around you or how to make things or how to do things yourself. It can quickly seem, I think, that you're going against the grain, but really so much of the world is going in the direction of working together in this better way, like Julie said, or taking care of their needs directly. The wild landscape gives us innumerable examples of the amazingness of beings to put together their life for them out of what they are doing in community with their surroundings. And those doors are definitely more available than you might think, and we're trying to present that in this area, but I know it's being presented in a lot of areas, like good education, whether it's nature centers or alternative schools or
or indeed folk schools. So
Right.
thank you for those answers. I guess I'd like to let people know that they can find out more about the Driftless Folk School at driftlessfolkschool.org on the web. There's also, if you're living outside of the Upper Midwest, there is this Folk School Alliance is a great website that will an organization that will has links and information about folk schools of this kind all over North America. And there's quite a few of them around. So this is a great way for a person who's maybe not able to go and take a year or a semester to do a microcollege program of some kind. You only have a day or a weekend. This is a great way to enrich your educational experience and to connect with people in the ways that we've been exploring here. So thank you so much, Julie and Nicholas, for spending some time with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Good to be
Jacob.
here.